You think you're about to step into a wonder. But what if I told you Petra wasn't built? It was carved out of a mountain. Not a single stone was placed. Stone was removed, one chisel strike at a time. And every strike was a decision that could never be undone. Here, a mistake doesn't leave a crack. It leaves a void forever. But the bigger secret lies in what you can't see. Petra didn't survive because of stone. It survived because of water redirected through the desert. An invisible system that sustained an entire city. And when that system broke, Petra wasn't defeated. It was simply abandoned. And there's one more thing that makes this even harder to understand. What you're seeing today might only be the surface. The rest of Petra may still be sleeping beneath the sand. So, is this really a city? Or a massive secret carved into stone? Let's go inside. We're talking about Petra, an ancient city in southern Jordan, hidden among towering red sandstone mountains. Petra was once the capital of the Nabatean kingdom, thriving from around the 4th century BC to the 2nd century AD. At its peak, it was home to roughly 20 to 30,000 people, with temples, a theater, plazas, and fully developed residential areas. In 1985, Petra was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and today it's considered one of the most important archaeological wonders in the Middle East. Let's explore the fascinating secrets of Petra. Petra, the Rose City. Petra is known as the Rose City, not because of some romantic legend, but because the entire city was carved into naturally rose-colored sandstone. What's fascinating is that Petra's color isn't fixed. In the morning, the stone looks soft pink, almost powdered. At noon, it turns a deep burnt orange. And at sunset, the entire city glows a dark red, as if someone lit a fire inside the cliffs. Petra wasn't just built with stone. It was built with light. Light redraws the city every single day. And that soft, rose-colored beauty makes people forget something important. Beneath that delicate surface are millions of chisel strikes that can never be erased. So if no stone was ever laid, how exactly did they build this city? The entire city was taken out of the mountain. Petra wasn't constructed. It was extracted from the mountain. No stacked walls. No laid bricks. No cranes. Nabatean stoneworkers stood at the top of the cliff and began carving downward, from the top to the bottom, layer by layer, the opposite of conventional construction logic. If they had started from the bottom, the upper portion could have collapsed at any moment. So they chose the method that seemed riskier, but was actually safer. There were no drafts here, no corrections. One wrong strike, and that massive facade would carry the scar forever. Imagine sculpting a statue over 130 feet tall, except the statue is an entire cliff face. And it wasn't just the Treasury. A theater seating 7,000 to 8,000 people, carved into stone. Temples, carved into stone. Facades towering dozens of feet high, carved into stone. Petra isn't a city that was built upward. It's a city that was carved away. And when you step inside the Treasury, you'll discover an even more surprising twist. The Treasury, majestic outside, nearly empty inside. From the outside, the Treasury looks like a Greek temple lost in the desert. Corinthian columns, a circular tholos, intricate carvings. It makes you believe that inside must be a hidden palace filled with gold. But when you step inside, you find a relatively simple chamber. Minimal decoration. No treasure. The Nabateans invested almost all their effort into the facade. the first thing people would see, because they understood something powerful. First impressions create authority. The Treasury didn't need a complex interior. It just needed to make anyone walking through the sick hold their breath. And when you remember that the entire facade was carved from the top down without a single mistake, you begin to understand why Petra isn't just a city. It's a statement in stone. Petra lived and died by invisible systems. You see stone. But what kept Petra alive was water. This region receives very little rainfall. The desert isn't an ideal place to sustain 20 to 30,000 people. Yet Petra did. The Nabateans didn't just bring water into the city. They redirected flash floods. They built dams. They carved channels along the cliffs. They turned dangerous floods into stored reserves. Petra didn't fight nature. They learned to control it. But then earthquakes between the 4th and 6th centuries damaged the water system. At the same time, major trade routes shifted. Petra wasn't invaded. It wasn't burned to the ground. It was simply left behind. A city that once controlled the flow of water was eventually carried away by the flow of history. And what makes this story even more mysterious, we may not have seen all of Petra yet. Most of Petra is still buried beneath the sand. Archaeologists estimate that only about 15% of Petra has been excavated. That means 85% still lies beneath the sand. What visitors see today may only be the outer layer. Imagine walking into a massive library, but reading only the first few pages. Petra isn't a finished ruin. It's a story that hasn't been fully uncovered. And to understand why this city was once so wealthy, we have to return to the people who created it. From nomads to the bank of the desert, the Nabateans began as nomads. They didn't own vast territories. They didn't command massive armies. But they understood the desert. And they controlled the incense trade routes, connecting the Arabian Peninsula to the Mediterranean. Instead of conquering by force, they controlled by position. If you wanted to cross the desert, you passed through Petra. If you wanted protection, you paid. Petra wasn't just a city. It was the central hub of an ancient trade network. And in a commercial society like that, the role of women brings another surprise. Nabatean women, a progressive social structure. In many ancient societies, women were rarely mentioned in records. But among the Nabateans, women could own property. They could inherit. And they even appeared on coins. This shows that Petra wasn't just wealthy. It had a flexible and practical social structure. A trading city cannot survive if it's too rigid. And that openness is reflected in their most famous architectural symbol, the Treasury facade, where east meets west. Look closely at the Treasury. You'll see Corinthian columns inspired by Greece, a circular tholos, yet all of it carved into Middle Eastern desert stone. Petra didn't copy one civilization. They selected and blended, like a merchant choosing the finest goods from many regions. They chose the best styles from multiple cultures. And that makes one more detail even more intriguing. Petra was once vibrantly colored. Today you see natural stone. But research suggests many facades were once painted red, blue, yellow. Petra wasn't a monochrome city. It was far more vibrant than the image we're used to today. And all of that drama was introduced through one very special entrance. The Sek, the stage before the reveal. You don't see Petra immediately. You have to pass through the Sek, a narrow canyon stretching over half a mile. Tight, towering, winding. It feels like the corridor of a massive theater. And then, after one final turn, The Treasury appears. Not by accident. Petra was designed to reveal itself at exactly the right moment, as if they understood something profound. A wonder isn't just about architecture. It's about how it's revealed. Before leaving Petra, you've just seen a city that wasn't built upward, but carved out of a mountain. A place that looks soft like a rose, yet survives because of chisel strikes that can never be undone. A city that once controlled water in the desert, and then disappeared when those flows shifted. And perhaps most of Petra still sleeps beneath the sand. If you had to choose one thing that changed the way you see Petra, what would it be? Share your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know which part stayed with you the longest. And if you enjoy looking at famous landmarks not just as monuments, but as mysteries carved into stone, make sure to subscribe, because there are many more iconic structures waiting to be seen from a completely different perspective.